Hey everyone, I'm joined here today with my friend Suzanne Fox, and we're happy to have our guest Andrew Chapman. I wasn't familiar with this channel until recently when Dr. Fox told me to check out his channel on TikTok, and it's incredible. And Andrew shared with me just now that he has lost 75 pounds, and it's great to know somebody else who has been on a similar journey as I have been. As you all know, I've lost 150 pounds, and he did the same thing. Basically, he switched to a plant-based diet and was able to
Mhm.
reverse health conditions. And Andrew, I don't want to say too much for you, if
No
because
worries.
I'd like you to give a little
Yeah,
background as well. But I
sure.
was just amazed with your background. But can you give a little more detail
Of
and the
course.
health
Yeah. Yeah.
conditions you reversed?
Oh man. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll give you the short version. And thank you so much for having me on. This really means a lot. So thank you guys. Thank you both.
Yeah,
I appreciate you taking the time.
yeah, so fun.
Um, so yeah, I mean the short version of this story is that I was in my late 20s. I was a touring musician. I played in like punk bands. And so traveling around the country in a van, eating gas station food, like think of like 7-Eleven, like, like the taquita, like all the worst, just garbage, right? And going from that as my main diet comes with a myriad of health troubles that it gives you. So at the ripe age of 28, I had high blood pressure. It was just mild hypertension, but nonetheless hypertension at 28. That's
Pretty
kind of
serious.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Type 2 diabetes, which I was on medication for. And I also had sleep apnea. I was, oh gosh, a number of pounds overweight. I used to weigh 225, but not in like the muscular, fun kind of 220. Like this was like I just looked like I got stung by a bee more than anything else. My face was swollen, all that kind of stuff. So overnight, I switched over to a whole food plant-based diet. Initially, when I started, I actually started with a juice cleanse. I went from that diet to a all juice diet. Yeah, I know that came with some fun stuff too. I'm happy to dive into those stories. But did that for about 14 days, and I mean, it kickstarted the health journey. And because I have an addictive personality type, it was one of those things where like the juice cleanse went into like kind of a raw foods or a vegan diet, which I maintained for about a year and a half. But it only took 3 to 4 months for me to lose 75 pounds. I reversed the type 2 diabetes completely at that point. My HbA1c was completely normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had lost actually about 65 pounds after 4 months. May have taken 6 months to get the full 75 off. But nonetheless, hypertension was gone. I was sleeping like I was a teenager. Like I had energy when I woke up, and the craziest thing happened, which is that I had energy when I went to sleep, which I didn't even know that that was a possibility, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did that, and then I just started incorporating like whole cooked foods into my diet after a year and a half of doing the raw diet, and 10 years later, here I am now finally sharing my story for the very first time.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
What
so
made you
what is
decide?
your current? I'm sorry, you
Yeah,
go
I'm
first.
sorry. What made you decide to want to be a vegan in the first place? So what made you decide that the whole
I
plant-based thing? What
It's a
was the
great
catalyst?
question. Yeah, great question. I had no interest in being a vegan. Like that's the honest truth. Like the biggest thing that I was interested in at that time was cycling because I was of the opinion, and a lot of people actually feel this way too when they're experiencing health troubles, things like that, that the best thing they can do is just work out all the time, right? I mean, we talk to people all the time that believe that the solution is to outwork your bad diet. So I thought that I just needed to get into cycling and running and lifting weights and everything like that. So I started looking up information on cycling specifically. And I found a couple content creators on YouTube, which I have a video about this on my TikTok that kind of like talked about like the influencer culture. There was some good, there was some bad. So by no means is this just a blanket praise for everything that was pushed at that time. But there was a content creator by the name of Durian Rider, kind of
Yep.
yeah, a conflicting character indeed.
Doesn't it
Um,
Freely the Banana Girl? That's his
Indeed.
his
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
they had that kind of shock factor, which I was like, there's no way. I was like, there's no way that's healthy at all. I was like, come on. And then I actually weirdly kind of like found things like the Gerson therapy, which
Mhm.
strangely aligned a lot in a lot of ways with kind of the fruitarian 80-10-10 style. And then that actually sent me down another rabbit hole. Addictive personality, ADHD, hyperfocus, which I consider to be a superpower at times when it's focused in the right ways. I read the 80-10-10 diet by Douglas Graham, and I just followed that protocol pretty much to the T for, yeah, the first 6 or 8 months. And yeah, and the rest is kind of history. Yeah.
So what is your lowest weight now that you're maintaining?
So maintaining, I am walking around at about 160 to 170, depending on the time of year. So I just finished up the cycling season, so I am a little bit lighter right now. So I'm walking around at about 162 to 165. But my lightest weight that I got down to is like during like the height of like the cleansing era early on. I got all the way down to about 145, but that was a little
Wow.
bit too light for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Uh,
tall are you?
5'10".
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So that's too late. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it was one of those things where it was like I'm walking around and I'm light, I have energy, I feel sprightly, but I just felt like I had no power at that point in time. But that was also when I was like heavy into like doing things like fasting on a much more regular basis and yeah,
So,
all that kind of
so you
stuff. So I've
probably
made
heard
adjustments.
comments like I
Mhm.
have that look out, you don't want to get too skinny and you're getting
It's
too skinny.
I
I've heard it all. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. It can exist. I don't want to pretend like problems can't exist. I've seen them, right?
But
But
the
it
thing is, Dr. Furman, as he said, people don't know what skinny looks like and what normal looks like. And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, 145 is like, yeah, I was too light, but honestly, once I got to 155, like no one could truly really tell the difference. In 155, I felt great and I actually had like the power that I wanted to have and the athleticism and things like that. So, yeah, it is kind of funny how that is. Like, yeah, people are like, "Oh, skinny is this." And it's like,
yeah,
sometimes that's true.
exactly. Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about your TikTok channel, which is awesome.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to know what made you decide to start a TikTok channel.
Oh man, what a great question. I'm still kind of working out the answer to that myself, to be totally honest. It's one of those things, like after going through what I went through, I felt like, and this may, kind of enter the territory of like kind of woo-woo. I mean, there is a spiritual aspect to thing that I'm a big fan of, but like
Definitely.
I felt as though I was just kind of called to listen and learn for a long time. So that was what I did. I just listened and learned absolutely everything that I possibly could. And if people had questions, of course I would talk to them, but I would not necessarily put myself on any sort of public stage. I there was also a part of me early on where I was like I never really wanted to become a vegan necessarily. And I didn't want my entire personality to be about, veganism or anything like that. So I was also just like, we'll see if it sticks. But I mean, gosh, here I am 10 years later, and it's like I couldn't
Ticket.
fathom doing anything else. And yeah, and
Yeah.
now for the first time, I'm now sharing a story of something that happened to me like 10 years ago, which is like kind of wild. But yeah, it's one of those things that I do feel more called to share my story and my experience now. And so yeah, here I am.
Yeah,
I'm
it's like
glad you're
super
taking.
important too, because like
Mhm.
so many people need to hear this. They need
Yeah.
to hear
Exactly.
it and see it, they really
Hmm.
do, because there's so much suffering. It's so sad. The whole
Yeah.
hospital is full of it. It's really
Right.
sad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. And like, especially like with, members of my family, like there's Alzheimer's in my family, heart disease,
Yep.
yeah, like all sorts of stuff. It was just, it was that. But the other thing that I was thinking about too during that time of just like listening, learning, just kind of soaking in all the information, like I'm the sponge, and I'm currently in that process of wringing out the sponge. I've filled myself up with as much information as I possibly could. But the other part of this too is that I kind of learned this concept of the word amateur, like it's an origination of the word is actually amateur, meaning one who does something just for the love of it and not
Oh, that's so
necessarily for a
beautiful. That's so
profession.
beautiful. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I kind of for a long time was like, you know what? I'm just going to be the amateur. I'm just going to do what it is just for the love of it. And I kind of always equated that with never pursuing social media, never doing anything, no activism necessarily, just being that, friendly amateur of someone who is plant-based. And, that is my form of activism or whatever. But now I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just extend that, that amateur, that, doing something just for the love of it by engaging in social media. I have a
Interesting.
talent
Yeah.
for it. I feel like I'm, someone who could serve the community and the message really well. So why not be a part of that, even as an
Absolutely.
amateur?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we go.
And,
Yeah, and you're
and your
doing
videos
something.
aren't
Your channel is
amateurish at all.
phenomenal.
They're very professional.
Thank you for saying so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I also just love production quality. I mean, which, kind of ties into the day job of teaching, production quality and social media and stuff like that. So, yeah, I've got like the softbox and my webcam is a cinema camera. Like, I mean, yeah, I love
Right.
to just do the overkill. Why not if you got it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's really nice. Yeah, I really
yeah,
like it.
Thanks.
I do too.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
And it might be obvious, but I still want to ask you anyway how you came up with the name Made for Plants.
Yeah, made of plants. Gosh, I thought about like 5 or 6 or 7 different names, and I was notoriously bad at naming and branding things for the longest time. Like growing up playing in bands, like the names of the bands were just ridiculous. Like yeah, I've got like a list of like band names that I still have on my phone that I just kind of laugh at because I would just add to that list after a while. But so the Made of Plants, I just kind of landed on this kind of haphazardly almost because I was like trying out 1 or 2 other things. And I have other social media that just uses my regular first and last name, which is Andrew Chapman. If anybody wants to go Google me, like feel free. But Made of Plants, I just thought, well, you are what you eat. And therefore I am made of plants. So, and it's, what was it? It's like 7 years is how long it takes for every single cell in your body to regenerate at that point. And I'm like, well, here I am 10 years. So I'm like, I am legitimately made of plants. So
Yeah.
there you
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, we all are, I guess.
I guess
Yeah,
it's fearless here.
Yeah.
Yep.
indeed. Indeed. Yeah. Hmm. What a lovely thought.
100%.
I have further questions, but Suzanne, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, your channel, so the stuff that you put on your, so are you really into the cycling? Is that what you're doing? Is like you do like
Yeah.
long distance on that?
Yeah, so I'm not as good as I once was. I will say that. Like okay, so when I first like got into like plant-based diet and veganism and the cycling and the durian rider, that whole phase, I went heavy into it. So I got into cycling. I started doing like those century rides, which is 100 miles for
Yeah,
those
that's
that don't know.
what.
Yeah, and then I did an event in Texas, which is where I'm from. It was called the MS 150, and that's a ride from downtown Houston to downtown Austin.
So,
And yeah, and that's like my favorite kind of cycling is just like sitting in like zone two. For those that don't know, zone two is kind of like an easy heart rate
yeah.
kind of training, like conversational. Like
Mhm.
you might be a little winded, but you can still talk. Like so I could just sit in that level of exercise for hours at a time. Like I'm not the fastest guy on the planet. I'm not great at climbing hills. I'm not a sprinter. I don't have the genetic gifts that are going to make me, an above average cyclist. I would say I'm average, slightly below, but man, can I just sit in the saddle for a long time.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah. So that's what I do. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to put some distance out there. And so that's my favorite kind of riding, which is yeah, I mean, funny story. Like once I moved from Texas, lots of flat places, great for riding a bike. I moved up here to Maryland, East Coast, and I live in a place that is like made of hills. And so now I feel like I'm just doing nonstop interval training. So my rides are much shorter
Oh,
these
yeah.
days. Yeah.
But more exercise, I guess. Getting your heart rate
Yeah,
going.
I feel like I feel like I burn as many calories in like 2 hours as I used to
I
in like four.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah.
But those hills, yeah.
Yeah, that is a workout. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many days a week are you out there cycling?
I oh man, ideally, um like 2 or 3 in like kind of an off season. If there's like events or something like that, then there's like a training protocol. And I've also got like a spin bike as well as like my regular bike, which you guys can't see in the frame, I don't think. But
I don't think so.
yeah, but yeah, no, I try for like maintenance and off season, I just go for 5 hours a week. Like that's my goal.
Okay,
And
that's
if
good.
yeah, yeah. 3 to 5 hours. 3 is kind of like my bare minimum. So like with the high blood pressure diagnosis, like the early hypertension, I am more prone to have higher blood pressure just generally. It's just on both sides of my parents' lineage. So there is every now and then, like if I don't have, at least 3 hours of cycling, and if I am not like, because like we love to, talk about all the wonderful benefits of eating like a whole foods plant-based diet, but every now and then it's like, okay, yeah, I did do that Beyond Burger. Oh man, I did actually skip that ride, and it's like, okay, blood pressure can rise a
Yeah,
little bit
it makes a
whenever I do
difference
that.
because I notice if I
Oh,
have extra
yeah.
salt, my blood pressure goes up.
Indeed. Yeah, yeah, the sodium intake can definitely do that too. Yeah. And that's a tricky one with endurance sports because you got to keep your electrolytes high so that you can stay hydrated, but you also don't want to just like overdose on salt nonstop. And you got
Right,
to find
right.
that balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are days, weeks where I don't have like the greatest, most perfect diet of all time. And so it's like, yeah, I try to keep myself in check by at least giving myself that bare minimum.
Exactly.
I mean,
Now,
just by the fact that it's all plants
Mm,
means it's pretty good. Yeah, it's
yeah,
a good
yeah,
diet. Way
indeed.
better than the average person.
definitely,
Indeed.
definitely.
Indeed.
Now, when I became a runner, this is like 4 years ago or 5 years ago when I started, I never liked running as a kid and never did it, at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you were the same way with cycling, or
Oh,
did you do it
so
as a kid too?
I loved riding a bike as a kid.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in one of those neighborhoods where it's like we all like got on a bike and would just like ride around in circles, like some like,
So fun.
8-year-old bike
Yep.
gang. Yeah, but
Yep.
but yeah, running I've never enjoyed. Like I am jealous of runners. I wish I was a runner. I am not a runner.
Yeah.
It looks
Everybody has their
terrible.
own thing, though. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Find what works for you.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So, how many followers do you have now in your TikTok channel?
I think it's getting up to about 5,000, like just under 5,000 followers.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
it's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and I just started like a couple of months ago. So
Yeah.
it like seeing that account like have a few videos, because that's really all it needs. You need 1 or 2 videos to go like viral,
Viral.
semi-viral, and you'll get followers that way, which I think in the near future followers will matter much more in the future than they do now.
Yeah.
You think
Yeah.
so?
Oh, I know so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so are you familiar with a guy named Jack Conti?
Mm-mm. What's he
Okay.
do?
No.
So he is the CEO of Patreon.
Mhm.
So he actually gave a TED talk recently. I have to send you a link after this, but it's called the Death of the Follower.
Mhm.
And it's actually kind of the opposite. But he was talking about like all the different eras of the internet. So Web 1 was essentially read only. It was just you could gather information. Web 2 was now you can be a part of it. You can post on the internet, which is this amazing thing. You can contribute to the internet. And he's like, and now we're transitioning into Web 3. And there's all these little phases that happen along the way. But social media is one of those big things in the transition. And he was saying that basically, like when you get on something like TikTok, this is the first type of app where it gives you a fully catered feed, and that has never really been seen before. Like Facebook, it was people you followed, people you knew, people you wanted to check up with in your life. Instagram was friends, maybe from high school or college
Mhm.
friends or whatever it
Yep.
was, and people would share pictures, and and that's what you would find, and the odd influencer every now and then too. But TikTok was the first where it was like, we're going to show you nobody that you know, and it's
That's
going to
true.
be, yeah, it's only going to be what you engage with, which is brilliant when you think about it because they learned how to hack our attention.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and when you start reverse engineering social media, and this is one of the things I teach, which is why I'm so passionate about this too, but whenever you start to like look into and reverse engineer social media, you understand that attention really truly is the currency of social media. So TikTok figured out how to hack your attention because they know what you spend one half of a second longer watching. in the type of
Oh
categories
yeah.
of videos that those exist in.
Yep.
So that was actually one of the things that convinced me to start my channel, as it were, because I was like, I'm no longer worrying about interacting with like family members or, people that know me or anything like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I am now completely anonymous to 99.9% of people that see this. And I was like, that gives me a weird sense of comfort. And now
It's
that,
very,
that
very strange, but it is a really good feeling. I love making the videos that I make too, because it's just so
yeah.
much fun to just be yourself, just do what you
Yeah.
do.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other wonderful thing is everybody's like, oh, I don't want to make a video that's bad. I'm like, oh, great news. No one's going to watch it if it's bad. Like,
That's true.
Exactly. It doesn't even matter.
yeah. Or they're like, oh, I've already said that in a video. And I'm like, yeah, there's still another 7.9 billion people that haven't seen it. Just go ahead and make it again. It's fine.
Right.
Yeah, so like when you think about that though, from the reverse engineering standpoint of social media, it's one of those things where it's like followers did not matter that much in the past year and a half or so because
Mhm.
you could be no one and get a multiple million view video. However, that will change, and that's essentially currently being rolled out. TikTok is kind of going through a lot of changes. They're kind of turning into the QVC of social media in a way. And then with everybody selling something on the TikTok shop, and then Instagram is now rolling out pay to play, which is they're testing it out anyways. I don't know how well it's going to take, but
Yeah.
that's where you're going to have to literally pay to get your videos seen by people.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
terrible. Yeah.
Right now, gather the followers while you can.
Yeah,
It's gonna
that's very
matter.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good to know.
How what kind of response have you received from your audience?
Oh my gosh. That is I would say I've seen every response to my videos. Like most recently, and it's been a lot of good and it's been a lot of kind of, middle of the road. And then there's been a fair amount of criticism as well, of course. And as with anything in the dietary preference world, like it can be like religion for some people, Like, I mean, you look at some of the movements that are happening right now, like specifically, like not to start fights in the comments section of your podcast, but like in the carnivore movement per se, they have a number of people who will literally just say things that are 100% incorrect as fact. And those things that people will hear and take as fact, they will then regurgitate
Oh
onto
yeah.
my videos.
Yeah.
So, like, I reversed my type 2 diabetes, right? Which is an amazing thing. And the way that I did that was with a high carbohydrate, low fat, moderate protein diet.
Yeah.
And that is very important to know because higher amounts of saturated fat can cause insulin resistance.
Hmm.
That fact, which is a fact, it is science that we have known for a long time, a long time. That fact will trigger people whose diet is only comprised of saturated fat. And they're going to respond by saying, all I eat is steak and butter. Why do I feel so good?
Yep.
Well, you might feel good, but nutrient deficiencies don't pop up in a weekend, or 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes take
And
years.
then if they have a banana or something or some kind of
And
fruit,
that's the thing. Yeah,
they're
you
gonna get
can
sick.
as long as you're living in your ketogenic diet, you're going to be fine. But the second that you reintroduce the carbohydrate, my fear is that you have eaten yourself into a state of insulin resistance and you will not be able to tolerate carbohydrates, which is by
Hmm.
definition diabetes. So, the response that I've seen has been a lot of that. And it's one of those things where it's like I have to always, whenever I get those comments, I have to look at the comments. I have to treat it with just the greatest amount of empathy that I possibly can and understand that behind the criticism, there is a genuine question. And then I will always and forever, like my mind is broken to where I view criticism as curiosity. And
Oh, wow. That's good.
yeah, and I try to maintain that as much as possible. It's hard sometimes for sure, but like when someone is genuinely critical of anything that I say, I'm like, okay, you have a question behind there. I'm going to find the question and answer that question. And simply just by doing that, it seems to really help to round out the response,
Yeah, I
which,
like that.
yeah. But let's have a little fun with this as well, which is I recently put out a video about hemp seeds and the hemp
Yeah, I
seed.
watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, hey, good news, they have protein. That oh man, that was like setting off an atom bomb in some people's heads. I was just like, hemp seeds are great protein. Everything's a great source of protein, to be honest. But like hemp seeds, they have protein.
Yeah.
And then people are like, "Oh, but it's not bioavailable," and I'm like, "That's not true." Or they're like, "Oh, but it's super expensive," and I'm like, "That's actually not true," especially when comparing with eggs, which, as
Yeah.
we all know, God, those have skyrocketed in price. And yeah, it's like, oh my gosh. And then like eventually you look at these comments and I'm like, I actually didn't mention the word vegan or even plant-based at any point during that video. Made of plants is the username. I guess you could make that connection, but like you had to really dig deep to find any sort of ulterior motive I had to make a video that said hemp seeds have protein. And people immediately just got super combative. And I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and then to kind of round it out, on the other end of the spectrum, I've had a few people reach out and say that I have actually helped them out substantially with their own personal health journey. I
Oh,
actually
great.
went
I was going to
through,
ask you that. Yeah, that's
yeah,
good to hear.
yeah. And sorry, I didn't mean to take the question right
No,
out of you.
no, that's great.
Yeah,
Great.
but yeah, somebody actually reached out and said that they had their HbA1c was at, I think they said like 6.9, which is solidly in the diabetic range, and they were able to bring it down, and it's now at about, I think they said, a 5.4, which I'm like, that is a
Awesome.
big dip,
Good.
That
and
is,
it's
yeah.
simply in a matter of months. And I'm like, that's
That's
amazing.
non-diabetic range. That's
Amazing. That
awesome.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That is non-diabetic, and it'll probably drop a little bit lower from that too, which
Yep.
is great. And they're no longer taking metformin, which is fantastic, and all these other things too. I'm very well versed in the diabetic kind of community terminologies and stuff like that, since that was one of my biggest things. So
Yeah, me too. Me too.
yeah.
And hypertension. I guess whatever your
Mm,
conditions were, then you kind of read up on it and become an
indeed.
expert.
Yeah, kind of a micro expert.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help it because that's the thing that's affecting you the most. So you want,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it's, with all the information that's out there, when you find something that truly, genuinely not just works for you, but for literally everybody, like it's one of those things. There is a book, just kind of speaking to like the blood sugar world, and diabetes world. There's a book that was, I think it was called The Rice Diet. Have either of you heard of this?
Is it the Walter Kempners?
It might be. I
I
would
I
have
think
to
think
look
so.
it up.
yeah, Walter Kempner's the
Yeah.
rice
Yeah.
diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and his whole idea was, what if we just replace a lot of the calories that these people are eating with white rice and table sugar?
Hmm.
Yeah.
What will
Yep.
happen to their
That's
blood
it. Yeah.
sugar? And it
Yep.
dropped in every circumstance. And that to me was one of those like, oh, white rice and table sugar. By the way, I do not officially make any recommendations for anybody to
No,
start,
but yeah. Yeah.
shotgunning white rice and blood sugar and table sugar, because it's generally not great advice. But the fact is that if you do lower your overall fat content enough to where you can tolerate carbohydrates and you just eat more carbohydrates, you will see your insulin sensitivity increase, which is what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it works on everybody every time. That's the most amazing
indeed.
part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Yep. It's the only reason why I'm not ever nervous whenever I say things like that. I'm just like, oh.
Say it.
Yeah.
Just say it because
Yeah.
it's
Look at
true.
the science.
Yeah, it's kind
The
of
science is
universal here.
clear. What did Dr. McDougall always say? He said he's waiting for them to come after him, but they never did because the research is clear.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always love that too. Whenever you hear somebody that's like critical of like a lot of the, plant-based doctors, and it's like, oh, they have ulterior motives. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, there's a lot of doctors that don't smoke. And you can't say like, oh, it's the non-smoking doctors are out there to get you.
That's so
No,
true.
they have
Yeah.
clear evidence and they present it as such.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to puff a bunch of clouds around your face? I mean, it's sort of fun,
Uh,
but obviously it's going to kill you. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And coming from someone who was a smoker, I
Yeah.
smoked for years, and that was one of the greatest things I did was quit smoking. So
good job. Good
Yeah.
job. You did it.
Definitely.
Yeah, you're
Definitely.
doing
indeed, yeah, I quit smoking, and like actually, it was in the same year that I actually went fully plant-based, and like, man, did that make a huge change in life.
I'm sure it
Yes.
did. Yeah.
Yeah,
So well, one of my last questions, I have another one after this. I thought of it.
please, yeah.
I wonder, with your TikTok channel,
Mhm.
because you mentioned in your bio you plan to start a YouTube channel. How,
Indeed, yes.
how will they all connect? And where will you be taking your TikTok channel as you launch the YouTube?
Yes, yeah. So good question. So I have actually last couple of weeks taken a little bit of a step back from the TikTok world so that I could focus my content creation efforts towards building up a like, and this is the strategy. So feel free to steal the strategy, anybody who's listening. But building up like a library of content that you are not going to release for a few months before you start a YouTube channel. Record 12 to 16 videos and just store those. And the reason why is because YouTube and the algorithm of YouTube actually tends to prioritize your content if you are releasing it consistently. So this will
Ah,
give you a launching
yep,
point. That way, if you take a week off, you're still going to post a video. If you take vacation, oh, you're still going to post a video because
Good to
you've got
know.
that 12 to 16 in the bank ready to go. So I'm currently in the process of filming for the YouTube channel as well as getting everything set for my own podcast, which I am also going to launch probably early next year as well. A lot of that content is actually just going to be cross-posted. So I'll, without getting into too many of the technicals, like
yeah,
I'll, kind of chop it up and make more like short form content for TikTok, Instagram, and those
sure.
social medias as well. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna be doing that early next year, and yeah, that's been an eye-opening process as well. But the other thing to keep in mind too is that with the thing that we all remember happening, like I'm not sure if you guys remember, but like they actually passed the law. They banned TikTok
Yeah,
officially.
they did.
I know. I know.
So it's gonna go away. Like it just that's how it
You think
looks.
it really will though?
I think it really will. And looking at the document, the reason why, and I have read the actual bill, and the way that it's intended to happen is if it's already on your phone, feel free to use it. It will no longer be supported by ByteDance. So it'll be slow, it'll be clunky, it's not going to be very well, it's not going to be catered to you. It's just going to start sucking after a while, which that
Wow.
sucks. And then when you get a new phone, which we all have to buy new phones every 2 years because of, planned obsolescence there,
Yep.
um, you're not going to be able to download it. It is just going, they're literally causing it to slowly fade away, which is one of my reasons for the big pivot over to, okay, you know what? I actually need to focus more of
Yeah,
my
that's
efforts
smart.
into
Now
YouTube.
I've
Oh.
heard that you can like somehow set your phone to be Canadian and then you can get TikTok anyway. Is this
Well,
true?
if it's still available
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if it's still available there. And you can also download like something called a VPN,
Yeah.
which you can change your digital location to anywhere in the world. So you could download TikTok that way, which is true. However, that is specifically outlined as illegal. And when we are totally honest about that, even if it wasn't fully illegal, a VPN costs money, which most people will not put up money just so they can download an app. And for those that will, it's going to be a very, very small portion of the
Yeah.
population. Bottom line, like
You're not going to
everybody
reach
on
anybody. So what's
TikTok.
the point? Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's on TikTok that wants to continue to grow their audience. We need to diversify like our presence on social media. So Instagram, I would go heavily into Instagram, and then the other is YouTube Shorts are outperforming TikTok right now massively. So
Oh, that's good to know.
yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. Mhm.
Good information.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So my follow-up question I thought of when you were talking about your health before and how it
Mhm.
improved. Were you under doctor supervision, and how did your doctor feel about your
Yeah.
transformation?
Yeah, he had a mixed response. Yeah, that's a good question. No one's asked me that before. So okay, so originally so 28 years old, imagine me smoking cigarettes, playing in rock bands. And he basically gave me the advice of, hey, you need to start working out. You need to lose some weight. Maybe clean up what you eat. And that was like generic advice. And he was like, all right, I'll see you in, a year, 6 months to a year, whatever it is. Great. I saw him a year later, and he is like like he's like a family kind of general practitioner kind of guy, but he also has a specialty in sports medicine. He saw me 1 year later, and I was 75 pounds lighter and in much better health. And quite literally, I went from like my skin looking at pictures was like gray, pale, like I was not doing well. And then now, like a year after that, I was like radiating. I was just like, my skin was just glowing because I was literally consuming almost a pound of leafy greens per day. Like that
wow.
That was my specific goal, pound of greens per day. And so like I go into his office and I'm just there for my annual checkup and blood work. And he stopped and he looked at the chart and then he looked at me and he goes, "Did you lose weight?" It's like, yeah, sure did. And he goes, "Huh, wait, how much weight did you lose?" And I was like, I think it's been about like 70, 75 pounds, something like that. And he was just like, "Huh, okay. Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm okay." Right. Yeah. And Suzanne, you're kind of taken aback by it. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny how that works, isn't it? And so I was like, "Yeah, no, I feel great. I feel super good." Like I made some changes and then I told him like I'm doing this thing where I'm eating a whole foods plant-based diet. I'm eating a lot of raw food specifically. I, got a bike and he goes, "Oh, the bike's good, you know."
Oh, of course.
Yeah, right. Yeah, focusing on the few things that he likes to talk about. Sports news, sports medicine, that kind of guy. So
Yeah.
he is like, "Well, we'll see how the blood work looks," and I'm just like,
Mhm.
"All right." Like that sounded kind of backhanded. But like the other funny thing is the doctor's appointment and was at like 2 p.m. that day, and he was like, but you're not fasted though, right?" And I'm like, no, I'm fasted right now. And he goes, "Oh, you're fast. Well, let's get your blood taken and we'll get you in and out of here." And I'm like, "I'm good. Like, take your time." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Well, we'll take your blood work. We'll let you know how it comes out." I was like, "Hey, while you're taking blood, can you also do tests for?" And I was like, "B12, D3, zinc. Like, I want to do
Yeah.
a full panel. Like, let me know."
Yeah.
Like, there's this weird little voice in the back of my head that's like, "Oh, but you might have a deficiency. You might
Yeah.
have
Everybody's worried. Yeah.
yeah, pernicious anemia is not something that
Ooh,
you
Yeah.
yeah.
deal
There's
with." Yeah. And at that point in time, like I would take a B12, but it would be like every few days when I remembered it, like that kind of
yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
he's like, yeah. We'll take a look for, everything. So they do the blood work and I get a call from him the next day and he was like, "All right, everything looks perfect." He's like, "Your blood pressure's in normal range, so you can stop taking the medication," which I had already stopped taking the medication at that point. And he's like, "Your HbA1c is perfectly normal, so you can stop taking your medication." I had already stopped taking that medication too. And he goes, and looking at the vitamin levels, he goes, "Your B12 is perfect. Vitamin D looks great." He was just like, "Your blood levels of zinc are on the lower end of normal." And he goes, "But blood levels of zinc aren't always necessarily a good indicator." He's like, "There's another test we can do if you're truly worried about it, or you can just keep your eye on it." So I added in a zinc supplement, and yeah, and that was pretty much it. And it's pretty much been off to the races ever since. But yeah, that was his like full response was like, "Are you okay?" And then
Yeah.
gave me the full like, "All right, approved," which is great.
That
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is great.
That's an awesome story.
Thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it. It's been
Definitely.
awesome talking to you. By the way, what kind of instrument did you play in the band?
Oh man. Yeah, okay. So a little bit of everything. I was like the kind of the gun for hire in a
Oh,
lot of ways. So I okay, so initially guitar and
uh-huh.
sing. And then I played bass in a band and I one of the bands that I toured a lot in, that was the band that I played bass in. And then years later, I actually was a drummer for a couple of bands. And there was a time, and this is real, this is true, where I was an endorsed drummer by a custom drum company. And there was a time where you could buy an Andrew Chapman signature drum set.
Oh, really?
That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
That
It
is so
is.
And
awesome. That is so, so amazing.
it
It
was
is.
it was fun. It was a good time in my life for
It
sure. Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's another time for sure. It's one of those. It's nice to every now and then pop on the records and listen to it, but it's like
Yeah.
anything with nostalgia. It's like, "Oh, good to see you," but you can't stay too much
Yeah.
longer after dinner. I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Thank you
Definitely.
again for coming on our podcast. We
Yeah.
really,
We
really
really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.